Hey, what's up guys? My name is Mark, but that's not why you're here. I'm not search engine optimized. But this little slice is. The Carl Zeiss Jena BIOTAR 58mm f2. In this video, I'm going to take a closer look at what makes this one of the most interesting vintage lenses I've ever had the pleasure to use. Its history, its unique features, optical performance, and of course, a little comparison to its distant cousin, the Helios 44M 58mm f2. Produced between 1950 and 1954, this lens is close to 70 years old, and there have been a number of different variants produced over its 23-year-long run. This variant is known as the preset because it has this feature where you can preset the aperture. I do feel in order to appreciate this lens, we need to start at the beginning. October 19th, 1936, the first 35mm version of the BIOTAR 58mm f2 lens was released as the standard kit lens found on the Kine Knight Exacta camera. At the time, it was the most technically advanced 35mm camera on the market, and you paid for it. The entire kit cost a whopping $270 US. Today, that same camera and lens combo would cost just under $5,000. Now, the BIOTAR lens was off to a brilliant start, but a few short years later, everything changed. World War II broke out, and heavy bombing in Germany, particularly in Dresden, severely damaged the ZEISS factory in Jena, killing most of the technicians and destroying the plans for a new SLR camera that was conceived in 1937. Surprisingly, in 1949, despite the destruction caused from the war, Carl Zeiss Jena managed to release the world's first 35mm eye-level single reflex camera, the Contax S, complete with glass prism finder and interchangeable lenses. Now, attached to the camera was the second iteration 58mm f2 lens. This lens was the first to use the M42 screw mount, and according to this Arcana Camera Corporation advert, this package would have cost $475. Adjusted for inflation today, that's just over $5,000. What kind of blows my mind is the challenge designing a fast lens would be without the use of computers. Like all those optical calculations done by hand. Those had to be some very talented technicians. Now, I mentioned earlier this is the preset Carl Zeiss BIOTAR 58mm f2, the third iteration of this lens, and it has some pretty interesting physical characteristics that are worth mentioning. With a 49mm filter thread, a minimum focusing distance of 0.5 meters, this particular lens has a 12-blade aperture and an f-stop range between f2 and f22. This lens also has the ZEISS trademarked T coating, and ZEISS didn't actually add the little asterisk next to the T until 1970 when multi-coating was developed. Now, another interesting mark on this lens is this, Q1, or Quality Mark 1. This was used to identify these were top products above the average for the world market. Now, the aperture ring is on the front of the lens. It's also fully declicked, which I'm personally a huge fan of. Down at the bottom of the lens are clearly marked distance and depth of field scales. The depth of field scales will tell you how much of the image is in focus depending on your f-stop setting. A handy little feature in the film area when planning out your compositions. So those are the physical characteristics of this lens, but to test it out optically, let's get out of this space and see what this 70-year-old lens can do. For my Helios review, I took the opportunity to shoot in an urban environment. For this review, I'm taking full advantage of the fall colors and decided to just live in this forest for a few hours to capture as many shots as I can with these leaves as the background. Now, shooting with the ZEISS Jena BIOTAR 58mm f2 is a lot of fun. And the optical results this lens produces really are fantastic. Shooting wide open, it's surprisingly sharp for such an old lens, if you can nail that focus. It's not clinically sharp, it's vintage sharp, and there is a gentle softness to the image. There is some vignetting at the corners at f2, but that's to be expected with a vintage lens wide open. Stopping down, of course, will not only make finding your focus a bit easier, but improves the overall image sharpness. Plus, the vignetting disappears. Now, it could be the colorful setting in the forest this time of year, but I found the color rendition to be quite good for a lens this age. Now, color is always something you can tweak in photo editing, but the natural colors and contrast I'm seeing are quite good out of the camera. Now, I never really expected it, but I personally became a fan of the 58mm focal length after using the Helios, especially for portraits. Now, thankfully, my little dog is with me to keep me company. And she also makes for a nice model to photograph. She's a gentle soul, which works nicely with this gentle softness you get with this lens at f2.
Cali chicken?
Now, the bokeh is wonderful and creamy, and depending on your shooting conditions, you can really exploit it to the max or minimize it depending on your preferences. If you're going for that swirly bokeh, then the magic spot with this lens is about 2 meters to your subject, with a background distance of around 7 meters, shooting wide open at f2. If swirly bokeh isn't your thing, then shooting at minimum focusing distance will give you a more traditional background. Of course, you could always close down your lens a bit to clean up the background as well. Question: if you find a climbable tree in the forest, should you climb it in the name of photography? Yes, I think so, even if you're not wearing the right shoes. Having spent some time shooting with both the Jena BIOTAR and the Helios, I'm definitely seeing where the one inspired the other. They're very close to being identical optically as far as I can see. And studying the comparison images, it looks like the Helios has a little less contrast and color than the BIOTAR straight out of the camera. But seriously, I find them incredibly hard to distinguish. It is a good thing I properly labeled the shots, because I could have very easily mistaken one lens for the other. I would actually love to hear what you guys think, so I've left a download link in the description below to the unedited RAW files and JPEGs for review. If you're interested, check them out and let me know what you think. Feel free to edit them as well, and please tag me on Instagram, as I would love to see what you guys do with them. I found the biggest difference between the BIOTAR and the Helios is definitely the handling. Physically, they're very different, even if the images they render are quite similar. Another big difference between the two lenses is the price point. Online, this version of the Jena BIOTAR can be found between $200 and $260. The Helios 44M58 is going for much less. Now, personally, I could see the Jena BIOTAR more of a collector's item for those who are fascinated by its history and its physical aesthetic. If you just want a unique image over modern glass for a good price, then the Helios 44 series is perfect. Now, the ZEISS Jena BIOTAR 58mm f2 is definitely the most interesting lens I've ever had the opportunity to use. this lens has seen a lot in its 70 or so years. It's inspired a whole generation of Soviet lenses, and even after all these years, we're still finding new and interesting ways to use them. I wonder if those talented optical technicians knew all those years ago the kind of longevity and impact their work would have over time. Now, I want to take a moment and thank Chris Griffith very much for being so generous as to lend me his cherished Biotar 58 for review. It was super cool to be able to use this historic lens for the past few weeks, and I sincerely appreciate it. So thank you very much, Chris. As for my big Helios 44M 58mm giveaway, well, the winner of that lens was drawn last night. And I'm happy to say that Raymond Wong has won that lens, plus a photodiox adapter. I wish I had all the lenses to give away. A big part of what I love about doing this is sharing the love of these old lenses with you guys. Well, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.